Welcome to another episode of All Chat Let's Talk. My guest today is someone who's been around for decades, like very many decades here in esports. He's probably one of the oldest people in the world as well, or at least looks like it. He has been commentating 6 TIs, he has commentating 4 majors. He's one of the best casters from the early days and is still relevant now with his stream. Welcome to the show, Draskill.
Thank you very much for that slightly hurtful intro, but none of the stuff you said was untrue, so I can't hate you for it, right? You said what the people needed to know.
Yes, I agree. So, Dota and everything in MMR, I used to, play with a lot of back pains, and losing MMR. But now, thanks to Arasi, who is the main sponsor of this show, I actually only lose MMR. No more back pains. It's fantastic. You should get one. Go to arasi.com, use the code ALLCHAT, not only for the share, but also for gaming desk, headsets, mouses, or green screens. Go there and use code ALLCHAT. So, the thing about you is kind of early days of esports, I would say. Something would happen and boom, it exploded. So you were actually a professional player in another game called Heroes of New Earth. And
I was, yeah.
how did that become, and how did SK Gaming pick you guys up?
Okay, so I guess a little context. When I first started playing Han, I was only playing because I was introduced to the game by people who I played another game with. So I actually got introduced to MOBAs from playing World of Warcraft, which sounds really strange, but my whole guild played. And they're like, hey, you want to play, first it was Dota 1, right? And then it was Han. So I played Dota 1 in-houses with people from my guild from WoW. And then after that, Han came out, and it was just kind of what everybody wanted, right? It was a new game. It was Dota, but it was better in a lot of ways, right? Because Warcraft 3 engine, even back then, felt dated. So we started playing, and I just pubbed all the time. I was, like 20 years old or something like that back then, which saying it now makes me feel even older, but it's, it's just the truth. So yeah, we played, and I just grinded pubs like nonstop. I was really into it. You know how it is when you just have nothing to do, no responsibilities, no nothing. You're just like, whatever, dude, I'll play 16 hours a day. Fuck it. Right? It's fine. So eventually I ran into Angry Testy in a pub game. And back then I made support, which, to this day, everyone knows nobody fucking plays support. Like, you play support, man, nah, dude, I'm mid, I'm safe lane, I'm whatever. I do all these carry roles, I get all the glory. But I played support, and I liked playing support for whatever reason. I don't know, maybe I'm a weirdo. And all I did the entire game, I shit you not, you got to remember, everyone sucked so bad back then. Everyone was so bad. All I did was stack camps. That's it. That was literally my whole bit. It's like, oh, dude, I'll just stack for this guy. He'll kill all these creeps. He'll carry the game. And, everyone didn't even know how to block a camp, or didn't even know, like, what stacking was. So when I did that stuff, he's like, hey, do you want to just, like, queue with me? Because apparently that was, like, new tech that people hadn't done before. So I was like, okay, whatever. Right. I didn't have anybody to play with back then. Most of the people from my guild didn't actually play Han. They only played Dota 1. So I just moved forward, and then I met Testy. We played in-houses together for, I want to say, like 18 months, because Han really didn't last that long, if you think about it. There was like a closed beta period, and I started adding all these new heroes and stuff, and they had like the mini falling out of the company, which ultimately ended up turning into Dota 2. But in that time, I got to play with Testy, and then he invited me to join 5, which was the precursor to SK Gaming. Now, getting a sponsorship back then didn't really mean anything. Like, it was cool that the company recognized us, but they were just like, hey man, do you want this keyboard and mouse? Which, by the way, I never got, just so you know. They never sent it. We played a bunch of tournaments together. We were considered one of the top 3 teams in the world. It was like us, We Heart Pigs, who I think they got a sponsor, but honestly, it was so long ago, I don't remember who it was. And then there was MSI. MSI was like the European team. You had No Tail actually played for that team, and Fly, Fresh Pro, who I think never even went to Dota 2. I don't remember. And then it was
Nova.
Trixie.
Nova as well.
Yeah,
right?
Nova and Trixie and Rexy. So I think they subbed out 1 or 2 players every once in a while. Like either Fresh Pro or Nova would play. I don't think they both played. Then again, Fresh Pro was offline. I don't know. It was a really long time ago. But anyway, yeah, we got into it competitively. We didn't. I was gonna say we scrimmed periodically, but the truth is, it was so sparse back then that the only people we could scrim against and even get practice was the other best teams, right? So if we weren't scrimming against We Heart Pigs or scrimming against MSI, we didn't play because no one, everyone else was so bad that they weren't good practice. And I'm not saying that to be like, oh, we were so much better. It's no, 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 no. You don't understand. We were the epitome of like a big fish in a small pond. Like that's literally all it was. So yeah, that's basically like the short of it. The TLDR, I guess.
So how? So basically, when Dota came out, like how did you like? Did you watch the first TI, or like did you get a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
beta
So
key?
so what we did was I knew Korok, Grant, a bunch of really old people from the scene, and we were all friends that we met. We also met during Han period. So like I met Grant and Korok and Josh, aka Painted Gold, a bunch of other people who most of these people watching this interview are going to be like, I don't know any of these people, but they were the ones who were there at the very start. And during TI1, I think it was in Copenhagen, right? The very first TI.
No, no, it was in
And
Cologne. Cologne
oh
in
yeah,
Germany.
Cologne, of course. Yeah, yeah. So we watched it, but we did a restream of that, and I was the one hosting the stream. And it was like me and a bunch of other people from the NA Dota community, some people from the Han community, because everyone was really hyped, right? It was Dota 2 was like, oh shit, it's finally happening. Because even by that point, Han was already falling off. People were already quitting the game. They're like, Dota 2 is in production. We just want to play this. It's what we wanted anyway. We don't want Han. We just want Dota 2. So I did that one TI, and then I was approached to do It's Gosu's Monthly Madness with Aaron, who I had never met before until that point. The first time we casted together was literally the first time we ever met. And apparently we just had really good, starting synergy, and it kind of just clicked. I know it sounds really cheesy, but sometimes that's just how shit happens. You just go and you do it.
I think if I look back to it, his voice was something unique. Like he was the first person I felt actually sounded professional, like in the scene.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
didn't have
absolutely.
that back then, so it was
Well,
very
he did
refreshing.
radio work. He did do radio work before the first time we had ever casted together. So he had like vocal training. Like I never had any. I still don't have vocal training. I just talk the way that I talk, right? So when we sat down and started talking about the game, keep in mind I sucked and I still suck, but he knew nothing, right? Which is fine because he was coming into it from the outside. So he's the one who was like asking me what's going on, and I would give whatever input, and people just kind of liked it. So right place, right time, and a little bit of luck.
Yeah. How would you, if you look back to that moment and like the partnership, like did you develop a good friendship? Do you feel like that's one of the funniest and the
I
best?
mean, we got along really well as work partners, but full disclosure, we didn't really hang out or anything like between that kind of stuff. It was kind of, we did what we did and we did it well. And not every single business relationship has to be like a personal relationship too. And I don't regret the time. It was, some of the best years of my life, like going forward, of course. But, we were never, what's the phrase, thick as thieves. We were just very good business partners.
Yeah, yeah. That I totally agree. But people want to know how it is.
Yeah, of
Behind the
course.
scenes
I
and
mean, I
so
have
on.
nothing bad to say about him. He was a nice guy and everything. It's just, your work friends aren't always your friends.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you have starting to do, it's Gosu. Did you feel like right away that the community was supportive? Like, did you feel like, oh shit, what is going on? Like, yeah, when you started to
It
do?
was it was a lot, and it was kind of hard to tell because back then you got to remember everything was way smaller scale. Like you get 1,000 viewers for an It's Gosu's game, and you were like, holy shit, 1,000 viewers was a lot. Like by today's standards, for TIs and stuff, you're getting across however many platforms, like 1 million or something like that, right? So yeah, it was surprising, but at the same time, I think we both just genuinely enjoyed what we were doing so much that even if we had gotten less relative to the time, it probably wouldn't have mattered. Like we would have enjoyed it anyway, and we would have kept doing it anyway because that's just genuinely what we wanted. And I think people kind of get that. When you're doing something that you actually care about and people see it, they're like, oh yeah, it's palpable. There's like a certain air about the people who are doing that thing, and I think maybe that's what people liked.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So after that, you go into TI. I think it's in September, of that year.
Yeah, yeah.
How did you get approached for that?
Uh, I just got a message on Skype, which yes, we used Skype back then. Discord was not around yet. I got a message from I think it was Ice Frog. It was honestly so long ago. Sometimes like some of the memories are a little bit fuzzy. You know, I'm 36 years old. Okay, I'm old. But I'm pretty sure they just straight up asked, and it was him. It wasn't like I got asked by Valve. I got messaged by Ice Frog, and he's like, "Yo, do you want to cast TI?" And I was like, "Yes." Like, why would I say no to that, right? So yeah, that was it. It was like the first TI, then the second TI I got directly invited, and then obviously the subsequent ones after that. Not all of them were worth Aaron, but you know, all of them were great. Like I don't regret any of my time spent doing that.
So during this event, was that the first time you were introduced to James Too Good?
Okay, so we have to rewind a tiny bit because I
Okay.
actually, yeah. I think it was in between TI. Was it 2 or 3? Shit. Okay, maybe we don't have to rewind. The story of how I met James is I actually met Wet Boss first,
Oh,
and Wet Boss and I played pubs together because he knew me from It's Gosu's Monthly Madness. So he was the one who I met first. And then he's like, "Yo, I'll just talk to James, put in a good word because we need someone to cover Dota." Because back then, the Good Studio had Adabisi and it had Apollo and Semler, and they were covering, Semler was doing CS, and then Adabisi and Apollo were doing StarCraft. So this was like really early days StarCraft too, as well, I want to say. So they had a studio that was already kind of like up and coming, and Webboss is like, "We need someone to cover Dota. Do you want to come over? I'll talk to James." And I was like, "Okay, sure." Now, at this point in time, Aaron and I also got an offer from Alex Garfield, who at the time was the CEO of EG. And he offered us, a salary, move out to California, full studio. And I shit you not, James messaged me and he goes, "Come out here. I can't pay you, but it'll be fun." And that's literally, you can ask him yourself. That's what he said. And I went with option number 2.
yeah, he has a certain charisma. Do you?
He's got a way about him for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What made you choose the Good Studio then, like over the security of Alex Garfield? If people don't know, Alex Garfield has to be considered as one of the greatest team owners and like person in esports. And
Yeah.
hopefully he comes back to save it. We will see. But like, what made you choose James?
I think it was kind of just at the time I was young, and there was definitely a bit of I kind of just wanted to spend time with those people more than I cared about the money, right? And I know a lot of people, I mean, even me now, like saying it, being 36, if I had the same opportunity, I don't even know if I would have made the same choice. Like if I was given it right now, obviously the numbers would have to be different. But at the time, I was just like, I know these people already. I know we get along really well. Obviously I didn't know James, but I knew other people from the studio. And I knew that if I did go, it would be fun. I knew he was not lying about that, right? So I was like, shit, well, I'm like 22, 23. What have I got to lose, right? You take a shot, you're young, shit doesn't go the way you want it to, whatever, find something later to fall back on. But fortunately for me, I didn't have to go that route because it worked out.
Yeah. So, but then you do the TI, right? And then after you
Yep.
move directly to Sweden, pretty much like 1 month after. Um, how was it to settle in Sweden in the start? Like, did you miss home a lot, or was it like a honeymoon period, or?
I mean, yes and no. I was so happy, like hanging out with the people from the house. There's trans. Okay, I have to say this little bit because a lot of people are not going to really understand what it's like to live in a communal house with like 9 other people, and that was like the lowest amount of people we had, right? It was at times a little bit. What's the word? It was mentally exhausting because it was a house full of gamers, right? Everyone in the house was up at all fucking weird hours. If you went to bed, there was a garage. Now you have to imagine we lived in a flat. You came over to that place, right?
Oh no,
Or the
I
one in
never visit
Tirsa?
there.
Did you?
No, I
Okay,
never
you were
visit.
you never. Okay, so it was a designer house first off that we rented out as a studio. So it wasn't actually a studio; it was just a house, and it was on a flat, but it was like an A-frame, and it only had 4 bedrooms. Okay, there's like 9 people in this house minimum. So when people went to sleep, when I first got there, all they had was a floor with some cots and a garage. All right. Now, when you went into this garage, it was like a sensory deprivation tank. There was no light, there was no sound, there was nothing. Okay. And that's where I slept, either that or the living room, for like the better part of a year. I didn't have a bed, I didn't have a bedroom, I had jack shit, but it was still fun, you know? So that place, we, at the very bottom, at the end of the hall, there was like a walk down stair into the actual studio where we did all the content pieces, but it was the same studio for everything. So sometimes it would be the StarCraft guys in there, sometimes it would be us, sometimes it would be the talk show that James did back then, which I cannot remember the name of, but that's where um, probably some of the best memories that I currently have took place. So again, no regrets. It's just funny looking back at it now because you look at that situation, you're like, how the hell did I end up doing that? You know?
Yeah, I think also like some of the personalities in that house, the mixture of strong personalities and a bit reserved one as well. But all of you guys were so funny and so humble in general. When you like everyone was so down to earth, and I think you had a lot of fun. Like I cannot imagine it being boring for one day, even if it was
Oh
mentally
God, no.
exhausting. Even if it was mentally exhausting and maybe you kind of hated them a little bit, still, it was still fun every single day, right?
Yeah, I didn't hate anybody in the house. I will say that there is some crazy shit that happened in that house, but I can't honestly say I disliked anybody. I mean, back then even Trance lived there.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
it was, Trance, James, Adebisi, Sean, me, Webos, Scriff, and then the QPAD Red Pandas team that also was there. So that was like an additional +5. And then whatever, Lady James was dating at the time, which if you don't know James, he was a notorious, very handsome gentleman, first and foremost. Second off, really good with the ladies. So, sometimes there is a girl over.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, it was insanity. Just absolute insanity.
Is there
But I
some
do it again.
yeah, is there some story that you want to share that is actually funny?
I mean, there's a lot of stories I can share. I don't know which ones would be appropriate for the interview. This is kind of
I mean,
a
it's free
don't ask,
filter
talk
here.
about types of
Like it's free
situations.
filter here. It's like who you want to throw under the
Yeah,
bus, or if it's yourself, or it's kind of up to you.
yeah. I don't know. I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to think of a good one. I mean, honestly, a lot of the stories are just situations that basically only arise when it's a house full of dudes, right? So obviously, everyone has their own like level of cleanliness, like stuff that they're willing to accept before they're like, "Fuck this, we got to clean the house." So this story is basically just like why you should never let this many gamers be in the same area. We had like a really big kitchen, and when I say big, I mean this thing was like I guess I have to say it in meters, but I don't really know meters and feet that well. I would say it's like 10 meters by like 4. So it's huge, right? Really big. And we had so many dishes at one point that Apollo, who still lived at the house at one point in time, got so mad that he just made like a trash like cart in the middle of the kitchen. And every time someone didn't wash something, he would just pull it out of the sink and put it on that. And he would only use like 1 or 2 sets of dishes, and they would be his. And he would wash them one time and then leave. So when I first came over, I saw this stuff and I was like the new guy, right? So I actually took it upon myself to literally do the dishes of like 7 other people for like a month by myself. I just literally did it, right? Because I felt obligated, and I'm like, holy shit, dude, we're living in like squalor, right? And eventually, other people started helping. Like I would get scripts sometimes, or get web sometimes. But I guess it was like the story of how I saved the sanity of the Tiraso house. But that was the first place we lived. We ended up moving a bit later, and we had a little bit less people in the house. But yeah, that was one of the lighter stories that we've had.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's fine. Yeah. So moving forward, Dream League starts to come. Like, how were you informed that you were gonna start to work Dream League? Was it like James be like, "Hey, we have this project coming on," or did DreamHack directly like contact you? "Hey, we would like to work for you," and you'd be like, "Okay, you need to handle that with James." Or like, how did it work back then?
It was mostly through James because we had an affiliation with DreamHack anyway.
Yeah.
Like before Dream League actually existed, we still did DreamHack events as like contract work. So it was 2011, I think December was like the first time I went to Sweden, and that was for DreamHack Winter. So once we did that, James got into talks with DreamHack themselves back when Robert ran the company, and we just decided, hey, we want to do a league. We have the people now who can actually work on it, and it was mostly like I'm just a guy who talks about Dota, right? Like I don't have business savvy. I'm not like smart in traditional terms. You know what I mean? Like I'm good at games, and that's pretty much it. So when it comes down to that kind of stuff, it was like James kind of ran the ship, right? Like he steered everyone in the right direction that they wanted to go. He sorted out, who went where, and all I had to do was just show up, right? So in all honesty, my job was really fucking easy. He's like, hey, you want to do this? You'll make this amount of money. And I was like, yep, okay, great. See you then. And I just come in and we talk about Dota. And then that was kind of the whole bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand. So during this Dream League period, right? You are not with AC anymore. You got another partner, and I can't remember who it was. Was it
It was Owen.
Lumi? Oh, Owen. Yeah. Okay.
Well, Lumi worked as well. It
Yeah.
was like Lumi, and then we would have periodic guests, just like they currently do now. I still think they cycle people periodically. And then after Lumi was Owen. But as far as like long term, I think I worked with Owen a bit longer than I did Lumi. But Lumi was from Dota 1. So
Yeah.
he had his own YouTube channel back then. He had a big following, and LD was the one that he normally worked with. But Lumi was like the co-commentator slash analyst to LD, and I was usually in that role as well. So it was kind of a weird fit because neither one of us was really great at play-by-play. You got to have that like speak from the diaphragm kind of shit going on and be able to tell people, what's happening. But I never really had that kind of ability. So I usually just stuck to like the analysis portion.
Yeah. So moving a bit, like skipping some years. So maybe we should like talk a bit as well, because Bruno was a part of the early days. He was at TI2 as well, and he was
Yeah, of
also
course.
part of Dream League. Making it a bit more funny. I myself worked as an admin. If you remember, and I had a blast all the time. It was very very funny.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then, like, how would you describe Bruno? How was it with Bruno, and how did James, like, how did he come into the picture, because he came from TI as well, out of nowhere.
Yeah, Bruno, and I could be misquoting this because I heard this from James. So I'm either misquoting or paraphrasing, I'm sure a little bit. But he kind of just showed up. And I mean, like, literally just showed up. Like, he came up to the panel because back at TI2 and 3 were in Benaroya Hall in Seattle. So that was still the smaller venue. TI4 was the first year they did it in the bigger arena. So I want to say he kind of just walked up and started talking to James, and then he just got to go on. Now, I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I recall that being like the gist of what happened. You got to remember, this is like 14 years ago or some shit. So it's been a minute. Actually, I think it was like 12, but either way, Bruno is one of the nicest people I've ever known. Like, just by far. If you've ever met Bruno in person, you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about. Like, he has that kind of persona where he's like, he always wants to try to do the best for everybody involved. And that's a very, very rare thing. So I can't, I can't say anything bad about Bruno. He's really good at what he does as well. He was a developer when we first started talking to him, and he started doing work for us and being on a panel. He was a software developer even back then, right? So he already had like the chops. But yeah, he just has that personality, Argentinian. He's just open. He's naturally very funny. Yeah, I can't think of a bad thing to say about him.
yeah. Do you think I miss him a lot on the screen, just
Yeah, of
because of his
course.
charisma, his suits and so on, and his funny stats, and so on. But I guess he still wanted to develop games in general. Eventually, if people don't know, he's at Valve now, so he
Yep.
should be fine.
I think he's gonna do. Yeah, he's gonna do more than okay, Val.
Yeah, yeah. So now, in the early days, you have talked. You moved to Sweden. You had a couple of gigs and so on. Was this someone that inspired you? Like during this time at the Good Studio House, like did someone help you or guide you? You said that James was very good at the business side. Like, did he help you a lot to mature a bit, or like to straighten you out or something, or like help you? Like, who did you look up to during this time?
Well, before I think is where I got a lot of my inspiration. It actually came prior. I mean, James was awesome at what he did. He was very, very good at getting people together and organizing shit that honestly, like if I was in a situation that he was in at that age, I probably would have failed miserably, right? He has a house full of people who are basically just from, a bunch of different walks of life trying to just work in gaming, an industry that basically was just not even a thing in the Western scene back then. It made almost no money. And he managed to make it work, right? That kind of shit is a gift. No way I could have done that. So that was inspiring in its own right. But I think as far as like actual commentary and stuff goes, I used to watch a lot of StarCraft. Couldn't play the game worth shit, sucked at it. But I watched StarCraft, and I used to listen to Apollo actually a lot. I used to listen to Jeff in Control, who passed away obviously some time ago, and those two were probably two of my favorite commentators. Even though I wasn't huge into actually playing the game, I just really enjoyed it, like listening to them. Also, you have like your tasteless and Artosis, who can forget that kind of duo, right? But those were probably the ones where I was just like, I would listen to them and I would be like, man, I wish I could do what they did, just like make it seem so natural and free flowing and just talk about the game and have it all make sense and like be cohesive and work together and like be able to tell a story too. Cause that's part of what commentary is. You're not just saying what's happening. You're trying to paint like a picture for someone who, I like to think of it like this. If they can't see the screen, can I tell them what's happening? Right. So if you can get that point across, then I think it's a win. And I think that they were very good at that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. Very good role models, how to say.
Yeah.
uh, so you keep doing Dream League and so on. Is there some period of time do you feel like that you want to leave Sweden, or are you still happy all this time, or like? Also, does this housing situation get better eventually, or are you still all
Yes,
in?
yes, yes. It gets better. It gets a lot better. I had okay, so we lived in Tirsa. That's where the flat was, where we had 1 million people. And then we moved to Lidingö, which I think is north of Stockholm. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
I think
a
it's
rich
north.
man place. Like only rich
Yeah, yeah,
people
yeah.
live
So
there.
we moved there, and that's when we picked up Jonathan, reinforced. He worked on Overwatch for a while, so it was me, James, reinforced, Webaskrift, Bruno at that house, and then also Daniel, who people won't know, so we won't talk about him. But this is the point where it's kind of like chill. Everyone has their own space. No one has to see the other one's junk randomly for no reason because they forgot to wear a towel. But even when it was hectic, I was only ever stressed because of either lack of sleep, which is just gamer life, right? Or just because thinking about how I want to talk. Because back then you got to remember, as much as people liked the commentary that I did, a lot of people were also very critical of what I said. Because when you're an analyst, you kind of have to say things how you see it, and you might not always be right. Like a pro player is going to know more than me, just straight up. That's how it is. It's how it's always going to be. And then the other thing is like how you deliver your message. Those are the two things that I think I work on the most. So when I was stressed, it was usually because of stuff like that. But things got a lot more relaxed. We got into like the swing of Dream League and stuff. Owen came over eventually after Lumi kind of decided to stop, working in Dota and move on to other things. And then it was pretty much just, Owen and myself until I decided to take a prolonged break.
So now in the leading house, so to speak, or the area where you live, when you have space for yourself, I actually remember working with you guys. So I was at Faceit at the time, and if people don't know, it's the ESL Faceit group, and yes, they also did Dota, and they still are doing Dota today. Um, we had a project, a very niche project that James did. It's called Pro to AM, and it's the worst and the best production I've ever seen in my life. Because you brought up Jonathan, who was in Overwatch. That poor kid. He was a kid at the time as well. He was forced to stand in the middle of you two with a paper sign that said "Face it." And then there were
I
some
remember.
robots that came with yours and James, and name. And it was fantastic. It was so bad, it was so good. And poor Jonathan, thousands of people, him just standing awkwardly with a paper sign. How did you plan that? Did you just go with the flow, or was stuff late, or like why did it happen in such a funny way?
It was kind of a mix of a bunch of things. We were pretty busy back then, like doing a lot of work. Obviously, we have to plan for like Dream League and stuff. James is trying to work on like his own game and other contracts. And I think they were also, at one point, we had artists in our house in Lidingö on the top floor working on a completely different project. Like I don't even know how they got there. They were great people. I talked to them all the time. I was like, I don't know why you guys are here, but great. So it was just very, very busy. And whenever James had free time to like come and talk and do Dota stuff, he liked to do it because he loved watching the game. He'd only ever play Silencer. It's the only hero he ever played.
Hmm.
But he would whenever he had the time, I was like, hey, I need someone to do this. And he's like, yeah, sure, I'm in. Just give me like 5 minutes. And when you don't have everything set up because you're in transition, sometimes you just gotta put a band-aid on it, and that's where you get the robots and the paper, and we didn't have time to really do anything, so hope this works. And then Johnny just sitting there with a big freaking white piece of paper with some writing on it.
Yeah, in one of my finest moments working with you guys, there was a lot of stuff. I also, I think, a lot of the after parties. If people want to know, Twitch after parties are super overrated. I mean, I'm not saying it because of the people, but like, I don't know. For me, after you have worked an event, for several hours, it's nice to relax and just talk a little bit. But in the late hours, it's kind of going to spiral out of control, and everyone is too drunk to have a decent conversations. There's no point to be there.
Oh
That's
yeah.
my experience, at least. It's very nice in the beginning when everyone is still a bit afraid to make a mess. Oh, I don't want to be the guy who's making a scene out of this, and then later no one gives a fucking, crashes everything. So I usually tend to leave before that, because no point.
Yeah, the weird part is, and I guess it's a little bit different now. I don't know how it is in like CS and other games, but in Dota, the first tournaments we did, they were 4 to 5, maybe 6 people working the entire day.
Yeah.
Like now you get shifts. You got like morning host and afternoon host and between afternoon to evening host and like the host for tomorrow that's not actually the same host as today. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but it was like 18-hour days, same people, whole day, every day. So when there was an after party, it was like after party, 1 or 2 drinks, go back to my room, fall asleep instantly. That was pretty much every dream hack I did for the first 4 or 5 years. That's basically everything I did.
Yeah, and you're also tired of all the like interactions you have like between the games and like and after the games and before the games and so on, because it was never like, okay, I'm actually just gonna go directly back to my room, because you want to still be some kind of a social as well. You want to talk to your colleagues, you want to go over things you think
Yeah.
went well or went wrong, or like what you can improve. And I think for you as a caster, that maybe be more of the case. Like how much do you like look at comments from internet in general, after a game or like
So
after a day of work?
the first few years, I looked at a lot. I think there is value in it, but I also think it's very dangerous because you have to remember that you're not going to be able to make everybody happy. That was a big problem I had because, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, when I first started, people said I was really harsh about how I worded stuff. Now, I just thought I was being straightforward, right? My own perception was that, hey, I'm saying something in a way that I think is just concise. And a lot of people would take that as you're being a dick, right? Which is fair. Everyone has their own interpretation of how things are worded. And that's when I started thinking about how I say stuff. Because a lot of the time, if I don't know something, I'll just straight up say I don't know in terms of Dota knowledge. If there's like a matchup or, if one draft is like kind of close to the other, but I can't really see who wins, I'll be like, it's close, right? Because that's just genuinely how I feel. But it got to a point where there was a lot of people just saying, like, the way that you say stuff is just abrasive. So that was something that I had to work on. I had to actively be like, okay, how would I say this versus what is actually the correct way to say it without people being taken back by my phrasing, right? So that was the main stuff. Since I played Dota all the time and I watched Dota all the time, I didn't necessarily need to research a lot because I was just kept up to date by just being, right? Like now, if I wasn't watching pro games for a long time, like if I went to go cast right now, I'd have to go watch a lot of shit because I just wouldn't be up to speed. But the main thing that I worked on was just how I talk, how I communicate my points. That was the really, really big thing. Because I remember one dream hack specifically. I made a mental note to try not to disagree with people because someone would say something and then I would be like, well, I kind of think this, right? And people will take that as just argumentative, even though I'm friends with all these people. We're going to go hang out and drink after this. We're not enemies, but people will look at it and they'll be like, wow, this guy's kind of an asshole, And I just really wanted to not have that be the case anymore. So yeah, that was my big hurdle, I guess, when I was working still.
Would you be say you were more affected by the people around you than the people comments on internet, or was it a little bit of both, or like the way you?
The people around me knew me, so they couldn't really say, "Hey, yeah, you're kind of being a dick," because they know it's just how I talk, right? Like if you hung out with me at all, if you met me in person at any of the old events, this is obviously for like the older crowd of the Dota enjoyers, but everybody knows I'm not actually like trying to be an ass, right? So they are always like, oh no, dude, you're fine. You're fine. But the ultimate truth is, if you want people to like you as a commentator, you want to, at least not come off in that light. You need to take some feedback. You just have to, and it can't always be from the people around you that either know you the best or like you, because their feedback might not be relevant. You know, because you have to. You're not going to get everyone to like you. But if a lot of people are saying the same thing, like you're going through and reading like 4 or 5 different threads, you're like, oh shit, maybe there's actually something to this.
Yeah, yeah. I usually am very good at shrugging it off. I never take it personally. I think you should.
Oh no, I'm not. I'm not saying like I didn't sit in my room and have like a tear going down my face while I was reading Reddit threads. I was just like, is it really that bad? And I watched some of my older stuff back. This was many years ago, and I was like, you know what? Okay, I could see it. How I state certain things, it could definitely be construed as a little bit harsh. So I just tried to make it when you put it up here enough times, it eventually sticks, right? So that's just what I did.
Yeah. So speaking of Dota, like we talked about you being from NA, moving to Sweden, and so on, and like let's talk about the regions in general. Like I felt like there was always a lot of potential in NA Dota early days. They just never. They always, I would say, shit, they're bad at lands. In the early
Yeah,
days.
to be honest, back then, I think it was a little bit better because people were still really excited about the game and they were trying to, everyone's trying to prove themselves. They want to be like, we're the best region or we have the best team and so on and so forth. And there were those, crazy moments, old liquid, Bulba, hook shot stealing, the
Hmm.
Aegis and shit like that, like really hype stuff. And as far as individual player skill goes, I think that NA has the potential of any other region. I think it's like the same. Like across all spaces, it's more or less whatever the peak is, it's pretty close. Maybe like China or EU have like the tiniest edge, but it's really just because there's so many other great players in those regions. Because you got to compare it by size. NA has like a 20th of the player base of like a China region or the EU region. So there's going to be more good in those regions, just statistically speaking. I think the main issue that NA players had back then was that, like people didn't even want to scrim on like 100 ping, right? Now, I would rather actually, like today, I would rather play on 160, which I do, by the way. I queue on EU West. I am from West United States and I am queuing on EU. That's how much I do not want to play NA servers. All right. So that should paint a pretty clear picture of how I think about today's NA. But, back then it wasn't really that bad. So I don't know what it. Everyone was just not that good. Like if you go back and watch like TI2, TI3, the game quality has just changed so much. Like I say this, to people all the time who watch my stream. Like a 5K pub lobby is probably higher skill than like the TI3 finals. I'm not even kidding. Like it's sad to say, but that's just how the game evolves. People get better. You learn new techniques. The patches change shit. So NA just couldn't really, in my opinion, find good enough like leadership and people who are willing to like just take the helm and be like, yo, this is what we're doing. Like really the only people from NA who ever really did much in terms of like captain or coach roles was like Bulba and PPD. That was like all we had. Right. And I guess AUI now too, because he's kind of transitioned more into that role.
Yeah. Do you also think it
But
has?
he
Sorry for interrupting. Like,
I guess we were no, it's okay. I guess we were talking specifically like US, or do you count Canada as NA? Because it
yeah,
really
yeah,
depends
yeah,
on the
NA,
US
NA, yeah, yeah,
nowadays.
NA.
Okay. Yeah,
So
because I'm pretty
Canada
sure
included.
yeah, so then you could put AUI in that as well.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think it also was maybe like the attitude towards the game as well, from the NA players compared to EU, or like you talked about people
I'm
didn't want to scrim, or like they didn't do the little extra to prepare themselves to be the best, so to speak, in the early days, or
it just wasn't taken as seriously, I think. I think it's more about like so that there was always that story. This is not actually related to an NA team, but I think it's the same premise. Like the logic applies to NA as well. Where EGM after they won TI3, he was just like a party animal, and he just like did all this stuff because they won TI. You know, you hit the peak, you capped out. So I think that that kind of ideology back then was still prevalent, even in teams who just place well. They didn't necessarily win TI, but they would get like top six, and they would be happy with that. You know, there was like a certain complacency factor to it. I never really got super close to any of the teams, so I can't say from an insider perspective. I can only say what I interpret from what I saw because I hung out with a lot of the people from NA during LANs, but that was about it. And I just didn't really see the same drive that I see in a lot of players today, like a lot of the teams as well. Like it is way fucking harder to be a pro now than it was. You could just be like a general good player, like talented, get some scrim time, and you're good to go to a LAN in like 2012. You're just good to fucking go. But nowadays, it's like, you pub 15 fucking games a day. I think Seb played like 23 games or some shit in one day, like 2 days ago. But that kind of stuff it wasn't a thing. So it's a lot of factors.
Yeah, and I would say like it's so hard now, and Dota, I feel like it's one of the games that are the most top heavy in terms of like if you're gonna make it, right? Like the chance, like if anyone starts with Dota today, you just give up. I like don't become you won't become a pro. Like you don't even try.
It is extremely hard.
It's
Like
so much people that are better than you, that started earlier than you, that think about the game more than you, that tried a little extra stuff more than you. Like just give up. I would say, pretty much. Like it's so hard. It's so competitive, and it's insane. And also the chances of making it, as a player, is very limited. You have like the top eight, like top 30 teams in the world now as well. Um, with the World Cup of esports coming, and the top heavy teams is gonna be more top heavy, so to speak, and it's gonna change players between them for a while, I think.
it's always been that way. I mean, there's the way the community usually works is that you have like the old guard, the people who have been there forever. They transition into their support roles, into their captain roles, into their coach roles, and they teach the new players how the game actually works. And then those newer players kind of absorb that stuff. There's definitely some validity to like that. It's really, really difficult to get to that level, and it absolutely is. And if you are going to ever want to pursue something like that, I would say almost anything is easier. Like almost anything is easier than that. But it doesn't mean that new talent doesn't happen because there are definitely like new players in the scene this year.
Yeah,
There will be new players in the scene next year, and it's really just a message of like you got to really want it. You got to want it so bad that you're gonna eat, drink, and sleep this fucking game if you want to even have a snowball's chance.
what I wanted to say with that is like I felt back then it was more opportunities for the lesser players, if you know what I mean. I understand that we are going all commercial and it's good to have like the big brands because they attract viewership and so on. But back then there was at least a thought process that every level or every tier should be able to have some at least. And now it's kind of the same teams with a lot of tournaments with a lot of money, and maybe they get burned out. I'm not sure, but like I'm worried about the direction. It's not like I feel like the players doesn't deserve this kind of money or like the brands doesn't deserve this money. It's more like I'm worried that it's gonna be like all burnout or like the younger generation cannot reach the top because there's no chances for them, and that's how we're gonna kill the game.
I don't know. It kind of depends, I think, because NA Dota is pretty dead. Like when I say dead, I mean like there's no real new tier one talent coming out of NA, but I think that's for like a different reason. I think the DPC was like kind of cool for what it was trying to accomplish, like spread the money a little bit from like the top teams and give like the tier two and tier three some room to grow. And I think in some regards it was successful. But now with it gone, it's definitely going to be more difficult. But at the same time, you're also seeing more tournaments pop up throughout the year that are not necessarily ones that the biggest teams are going to always want to attend, right? Because here's an example, like Team Spirit Dream League was going on. I think they actually ended up winning, didn't they? Or I might be cooked, but
Which
I think
one?
they the most recent one,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
Spirit Against Extreme Gaming, they
yeah,
won. I would think it was like 3-2 over Extreme.
yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of pro players will always talk about how it's hard to constantly be on top. like to be on top of your game. You can kind of maintain like, 80 to 90% of your ability just by playing a few pubs, but you're not going to be like your absolute peak form as a team unless you're really practicing together, boot camping, doing all this other stuff. And you want to be in that prime shape for the actual, big lands like TI, your Riyadh Masters, that kind of stuff. So I think that the way that it used to work is that the people who were a little bit below the top back then, since everyone was, kind of a lot worse, the people who were right below the top could actually upset the best teams, right? Because back then it wasn't as algorithmic. They hadn't solved every single thing that could actually happen in the game. And it was pretty easy to force a team to make a mistake, even if they were conceived as being better than you. So if that worked back then, it's not going to work now because the teams are that much better, right? Like if you watch a Spirit or, whomever play a Dota game against a worse team, that team has like literally no chance. Not only because the way the game works now is just a lot different, but the macro game, the decision making, like the level of gameplay has just gone up so much that if you make even like the smallest mistake against an absolute, like let's say peak form Spirit, if you mess up like literally once, it's good night. Like it is a struggle for those types of teams to make it. But I think the important thing that still happens is that the people who are seen as good can still join another team, like be picked up as a rising player. Like Laurel has only been around since what, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. That's pretty new, and he's playing for arguably the best team on the planet. So
Yeah.
just depends on how bad you want it, I guess.
Yeah. I think if we're talking about the old days and new days and mix, I think one of the most impressive players for me has to be Puppy. Um, I don't like he's now like in tier two, but he's still fighting and he's still playing bigger events, and I think he can still compete at the top level. And I don't think we have such a dedicated player as him ever in the game. I'm thinking of someone that has played the same role, and tried so many different lineups and like being consistently so good with not only winning tournaments, just getting a top four, like getting top four after like 2016 or 17, when the game really started to you see all the talent rising up. I think is super impressive, and I truly hope he comes back, at the
Yeah,
top again. I think it's possible.
yeah. He was at every single TI except for last year,
Yeah,
correct? They didn't qualify.
yeah,
Yeah, that was. But they almost made it. I think they were like
yeah,
one series away from qualification.
yeah,
So yeah, I've talked about Puppy a bunch of times. Really cool guy. Obviously, incredibly smart when it comes to Dota. I think it's just like it's a passion thing, When you just love something so much and you can just keep going back to it and keep going back to it, and you're willing to put in like that kind of effort. I think he's like kind of an ode to that. He's like he like is Dota, Like I'm sure he has other things in his life. He has like a family and stuff, but it's really hard to compete with someone who cares that much and is willing to put in that amount of time, because he made it to TI with like 6 or 7 different lineups
yeah.
over the years. He obviously won a TI as well back on Navi, but yeah, I mean, as far as legendary players go, I think if you talk to anybody, even today, he would be on that list. Top 3, top 5 most notable players of all time.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like now, like especially like in the early days of Dota 2, you talked a lot about the Warcraft Dota legends, as but they did. I felt like the one thing that I noticed with Dota 2, very few of the old school guard from China came over and became good, or most of them had already retired when Dota 2 came.
Well, you got like Zhao 8. Zhao 8 is
Yeah,
still he's like the puppy of the Eastern scene.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, but in general, I missed a lot of pros, and like a lot of what if if they came to Dota 2, like
well, there was what
820,
like
357. He played a bit.
well they went into commentary, right?
Yeah, yeah,
357 played for eHome as
yeah. He did.
well
Yeah,
for the
for a few
for the
years.
first
Yeah,
couple of years.
yeah, yeah. Um,
So I think in some aspects they still stay with Dota. They just didn't all necessarily play professionally, because Xiaowei played for a number of years, then went into coaching. 357 definitely played.
yeah,
ZSMJ played for a while, but
But
I think he
he
had like
never made it like good again. Like he was never good, I would say. Sorry.
yeah. And then obviously you had Burning won some tournaments. Didn't he win a DAC one year? I want to say
Mm,
he.
I don't remember, but I know they had like this super DK team, the team that probably should have won TI4. You
Yeah.
know, um, but I was thinking about 820. I think he was the one who didn't follow to Dota 2, but I think he also went to coaching. There's a lot of
Yeah.
I don't know why, but a lot of numbers in China back in the days with nicknames. So it's hard to
Yeah, that's
separate
true
them all.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about it, and I'm like, man, maybe I should have coached. I was approached a couple of times in the first couple of years that I was around for a coaching role, but I didn't really think it would have been a fit for me back then. I just wanted to talk about the game, and it felt like it would have been a lot of work. But
Yeah.
nowadays I'm like, maybe I could do that at some point because I do enjoy watching the game. I enjoy talking about the game, learning about the game, all that other stuff, and it's a completely different beast, right? Like you have your competitive over here, and you have your pubs over here, and these things do not go together, right? It's like oil and water, man. Like everyone like they'll have this idea and they'll watch a pro game and be like, oh my god, Yatoro did this, and then they'll bring it into a pub game, and it's like, man, I
Thank you.
get that, like I get it. I get it. You're seeing something, you're trying to emulate someone who's better than you. It's admirable to a degree to try to be better, but at the same time, you're not that guy, pal.
Yeah.
You gotta also understand like why they're doing the things that they're doing in a lot of cases. But when you have the ability to get five players to like follow your direction and be like, yo, this is what we're gonna do. I think you guys are gonna be able to do this. You got your whole lineup ready to go on the same page. That's a very cool feeling, right? You get your team, set on the path. You're all doing the same shit together. I think that would actually be a fairly rewarding avenue. So if I was to say like one regret that I had, it would have been not trying that at some point.
Do you want to reveal like which teams approach you or like?
So the main one that I remember was Ad Finum. This is back when they were on like a really big hot streak.
Yeah.
They were like winning tournaments and shit. This is like, what tournament was that? It was
Boston
one in
Major, like they came second at the Boston Major.
that was after they asked me and I declined,
Okay.
I think. Yeah, so it was before that. There was a tournament in Ukraine that I can't remember the name of, and we were there for that. It was We Play. I think it was We Play,
Hmm.
and they approached me about a coaching gig. But that was one of the more notable ones. The other ones were like tier 2, tier 3 teams and stuff. But obviously, you got to get your foot in the door. I'm sure with some time, I could have potentially pulled some bigger names. Fingers crossed. But yeah, I kind of regret that not taking that opportunity.
Would you consider coaching still today, or?
I'd have to work on my own shit. I'm not opposed to the idea, but I would really have to like hone in and actually put in some real work because people who don't actually know me, when I don't want to do something, man, I'm like just the laziest. When my mind's set to it, I'm good. Like I'm focused. I'll be able to do whatever I need to do. But sometimes, like when they approached me about it, I knew that I didn't want to do it at the time. And I was really focused on commentary. So I knew I wouldn't be able to give it my all. But if a good team approached me now, and I would be like, yeah, okay, why not? Right? I don't know why you're asking me now. I'm old. I'm washed. But I would give it a try, sure.
Yeah. Speaking of that, like you haven't casted a lot, and we don't need to go into the details, but your last gig I think was around 2020 for some qualifier, if I remember correctly, and now you're
Yep.
streaming. Like, do you enjoy the streamer life? Do you think like it kind of fits you perfect? You have like you go up, you stream, and then you don't like.
Yeah, I do. I do enjoy streaming a lot. I realize that the community that I have on my stream is just a bunch of people that I just genuinely like. So it's nice to have that. I know people are going to say, parasocial and all that other shit, but you also got to remember I met a lot of these people. I went to a lot of events. They went to these events. I've met them. They are humans, right? Uh, but yeah, I do enjoy streaming. Do I wish I could do some more stuff? Absolutely. Like commentary, I miss. The people in the scene are all great. I miss a lot of them dearly. Yeah, but I have no complaints. Like where I'm at right now, if I want to do more, I can always like reach out and try to do more. It's just a matter of when the time is right.
Yeah. But like so you're saying that you're willing to come back to casting like right away, like you're saying you're missing it, like would you be open to like any tournament just to get like your
Yeah,
skills
sure.
back or?
Online. online tournaments. I mean, that's where I started, right? It's Gosu's Monthly Madness. We would cast like once a week, and they would pay us like $500 or something like that for like the whole gig. Okay, it was more than that, but yeah. I mean, the thing is, when you like doing something, which I always loved commentary. I was always a big fan of talking about the game. It's never work, right? So when someone approaches you and they're like, "Hey, we're going to pay you this money to do this thing you would have done anyway," I'm like, "All right, say less." I'm in.
Yeah. Listen, well, it's happy there. Hopefully, you get back when you feel ready, and
Yeah.
and so on. Would it be like, so? If someone come to approach you, would it be like any other game you would like to cast? For example, CS is big, Valorant is big, and so on. Rainbow Six is big, or like you don't like shooter games in general, or like how yours stands
Oh well,
now.
it's not about like or dislike. My wheelhouse is analysis, right? I like to get into the mechanics and like the strategy and all other stuff. And when I don't feel confident in my ability to talk about the game, I would probably decline. So if someone asked me, "Yo, do you want to do Valorant? Do you want to do CS?" I'd be like, "Give me a year." Give me a year to learn what the hell is going on. So when I get on the microphone, I'm not, making a fool out of myself, right? Which I think is fair for anyone, right? You don't want to go in there and stand up in front of a bunch of people and talk about something you don't know about. But I know Dota. So if someone were to ask me about that, sure, I'm it.
Yeah, it's like me, I started this podcast. I have no idea how to do it. I have no idea how to be a host. I just go with it. You
Yeah.
telling me I should wait 1 more year before I release this?
Well, I think that some things you do have to learn by doing, right? You do have to learn some stuff by getting your foot in the door. And I don't think that I would be unable to carry on a cast. I just think that I wouldn't be able to convey the ideas that I like to convey when I do the cast. So would I be comfortable? Probably. But would I be at my best? Absolutely not.
Yeah, okay. Um, so speaking of that, like a lot of streamers, they are part of organizations. They are kind of ambassadors. They're not directly a part of the team, but they represent the team.
Sure.
Do you have any of that offers, or like did you decline by a reason, or like would you like to be a part of, like, be a brand ambassador for some bigger org?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always down to represent a company that I think is doing good work. But when you don't actually put your name out there, you don't really get many offers. So obviously, right now, I haven't gotten much. But I'm sure if I was working again and people saw the kind of work that I was doing, they might be interested. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I'm a hard sell. Maybe I'm a brand risk. I don't know. But
But did
yeah,
you
I think that.
ever do you have any offers? Like you talked before about Alex Garfield giving you as a caster. Like, did you ever get any offers to be a streamer for an organization?
Oh no, not a streamer exclusive thing. No, it was normally just like contract work for commentary and stuff, or analysis panel work, stuff like that. But nothing, no, nothing exclusively for streaming.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Happy to know you're still in the game after all these years. Is there
Yeah,
anyone you want to shout out?
I mean, just shout out to the good studio guys. You guys all know who you are. You rock. I miss you all. Hope you're all doing well. And obviously the community that still supports me after all this time. Some of you guys are older than me, dude. That's crazy. But that's about it. And obviously, thanks to you, Lofa, for having me on.
Yeah. Thank you as well. So that's everything for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to visit arasi.com and use code ALLCHAT for 10% off of all their product. Thank you and goodbye.